So this gets into saying no. Can everybody just do that? Say no.
No.
No. Okay. So I've got a really good example of this. So just this past year, I was asked to come back on the elder board again. I had to say no to that. And there were a couple of people who weren't all that pleased with me that I had to say no. But where I put my priorities is the one thing that I really need to be able to do very well is to work with men who are in transition right now between jobs. Maybe they've been laid off from a job, or maybe they just need to kind of reinvent themselves, and they haven't done a resume in 20 or 25 years. Or maybe some of them have never done a resume. So where I decided that I need to focus is on helping men who are going through that transition and just need that, my gosh, how do I structure this resume? How do I put myself in the right light without sounding like I'm bragging? How do I make sure I'm not over-embellishing my credentials? And just being able to be that independent third party, to be able to help them to structure their resumes and really help them put their best foot forward as they're trying to start up a new career. Jim has sent a number of men to me where we've sat down, and Jim also knows that for the men that he sends to me, he kind of gives them a little warning and says, unless if you want to hear what you want to hear, you probably shouldn't talk to Lonnie. If you want to hear some brutal truth, and if you can handle it, Lonnie's a good guy to talk to, because that's exactly what I do. But that's the one area that I decided I really needed to focus on, because with all the things that I'm doing right now, I had to limit where my focus was. So I had to say no to the elder board. You might have seen me play drums up on stage a few times. You probably haven't seen me too much lately, because again, from a focus perspective, I had to say no to that, because the priorities of where I was at right now said that I couldn't be focusing on those things. I needed to be focusing on other things. Now, that's not to say that, I'm not sitting here saying being on the elder board is not a good thing. It's an absolutely wonderful thing. It's just, that's one of those things that I had to say no to. And if you have a difficult time saying no, then don't even bother reading the next 4 that I've got to talk through. Because you've got to be able to set those priorities. You've got to be able to say, and sit down with your wife, and sit down with your kids if you need to say, here's the things that we need to be focusing on. Do you agree with these? Yes, no. And if you agree with these things, then we've got to make sure that we're walking the talk. And that when other things come up that look like they're going to suck time from us, then we've got to have the courage to be able to say no. Now, can you adjust your priorities? Of course you can. But it's not the kind of thing that you adjust your priorities with every new instance that comes up. Because then all of a sudden you have no priorities. You're just kind of working to whoever knocks on your door next. Okay? So again, be honest with yourself about what your priorities are, and make sure you're walking the talk on those priorities. Second thing is schedule in everything. So how many people use like an Outlook calendar? Okay, good. So on your Outlook calendar, do you put personal stuff, or is it mostly work? Okay, good. That's good that it's mostly both, because there's a lot of people who will only use it for work. Now the next question is, on your Outlook calendar, do you schedule in time to do things that maybe you've got some to-dos? Do you actually physically schedule those in on your calendar? Okay, I heard 2 people say yes. Okay, a lot of people don't. And a lot of people use that time as, well, I'll just try to get it done at a certain point in time. I think it's really important, particularly if you have a difficult time with discipline, in being able to control your time and control your day. And if you have a difficult time with procrastination, okay, does anybody have a procrastination issue? No one will admit it. Okay, there you go. Trevor, you didn't raise your hand. No, you don't have a procrastination issue. You're good. But if you have a difficult time with procrastination, or if you have a difficult time with trying to schedule work in, your calendar is a great place to be able to schedule in all the to-dos. If you've got a bunch of honey-dos that have to be done, put them in on your calendar. And be realistic about the time. Don't put something in as it'll only take me 10 minutes, when you absolutely know it's going to take you an hour. Because it's issues like that, when you don't schedule things in, and you have unrealistic expectations about how long something's going to take, that's when the pressure really starts getting up. Because as your to-do list starts getting longer and longer and longer, that's where procrastination starts setting in, because you start developing this, this fatalistic view of, my gosh, my list is so long anyways. You know, how am I ever going to make a dent in this stuff? So it's absolutely vital that you schedule things in. Now, some of you may be sitting here saying, oh, I just can't do that. I'm going to borrow a term that I heard Jerry use a number of years ago, which I love, which is called fertilizer. You could do it. Fertilizer is a term for something else. If you want me to explain it to you later, I can. Okay, good. I got a couple of quizzical looks. You could do this. You're just making a choice not to. It's very easy to say, oh, I'm just not a structured, organized kind of a guy. Then become a structured, organized guy. Okay? Don't give yourself the excuse to say, that's not how I am. You know, I like to be random and I like to be freewheeling. Don't. You've got to put some discipline in place, and you've got to be able to do this. Because if you don't, then you will continue to live in this world where you struggle with this work-life push-pull, and you're just not going to get enough done. And it will particularly impact you, for those of you who don't have kids yet, it'll hit you big time when you've got kids. And for those of you who do have kids, you could probably look back and see where some of those things where you've had this too big of a list, and you've got something that one of your kids wants you to do with them and you're unable to do it, or you know the list is getting bigger and you're feeling guiltier and guiltier because your kids are wanting you to do things. You just get into this downward spiral. So make sure you schedule everything in and use your calendar for not just the meetings and for the important stuff, but for all the other honeydews that you've got to get done. The third thing is measure success and results and not hours. I was one of those guys who would wear the number of hours a week that I work like a badge of honor. And it's like, I worked 60 hours this week. Look at me, look how tough I am. And that was the culture that I was raised in. In the consulting culture that I was in at Accenture, that was, you know, if you were working until 9 or 10 at night on stuff, there was a certain amount of bravado there. There was like, you know, man, you must be dedicated. Look how hard you're working. So when you're bred into that kind of a culture, it's very difficult to shake it, because now you've tied reward onto hours worked versus the results that you achieve. I had to kind of flip the bid on this. And I did it about that same time, 1993, where I really had to start focusing on, it's not how many hours you work on something, it's the results you actually produce. So you've got to make sure that as you're doing things, that you're focused on what is the result you're trying to attain, and reward yourself if you deliver the result in less time than you thought. Don't look at it and say, gosh, you know, I really should have spent some more time on this. That's not the goal. The goal is the result. It's not the work effort. So number 4, don't play the peer pressure game. So there was, can you see okay? Because I'm like standing right in front of you here, and I'm, okay, you can see through me because I'm very narrow. So, I am, okay. So there was I worked at Microsoft from 1995 until 2004, and I was working with a group. I was on loan to a group in one of the product groups. It was actually in the it was in what's called the information worker area, and at that time I was running corporate procurement at Microsoft. So I was on loan into this group, and they were working on this hot project. And part of me being on loan into this group was to help me evaluate if I actually wanted to go work there on a full-time basis and actually transfer into this group. One of the things that I noticed about this group is that they routinely brought dinner in and routinely worked in the office until 9 or 10 at night. That was their standard mode of operation. The vice president of the group, who was actually working, he was on loan here from Asia, had nothing else to do. So he would just stay at work. And he thought nothing of scheduling 7 p.m. meetings or 8 p.m. meetings.